after the cruise, I wanted to pay more attention on how I was feeling in the moment, try to stay as present as I could, and be aware of how I'm feeling so I can make the adjustment. And what I've noticed, and I'm sure this was probably always happening, little things I would do, I would get upset over. And I was telling someone earlier, like taking the forks out of the dishwasher. One gets stuck and you yank on it, and instead of just saying, well, what's this all about? Why is that anger that seems so quick to come up? Little things like that would happen to me. And of course, now that I'm being more focused on it, of course, I catch it. And maybe I was always doing that and didn't catch it as much. But
well, we think that it's changed in this way. We think that after a deliberate, exaggerated period of time where you feel so good, you are now no longer tolerant of not feeling good. And so we don't think your anger is because the forks are tangled. We think the tangled fork is sort of the end result of the way you're feeling, like other things that are sort of out of balance are the end result of the way you're feeling. And once you have tasted that sweet energy of consistent alignment, your demand level is higher. In other words, you can't go back. And so what's happening is your day-to-day attitude about some things that's not quite up to speed with where you now want it to be is sticking out like sore thumbs or tangled forks.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, kind of along that line, too, in March or so, where I was working was getting overwhelming, and so I started taking breaks. I usually worked right through lunch, eat a sandwich or whatever, and just keep on working. And so I went out to my car and I started listening to your CDs or tapes and sort of realigning during my 30 minutes. I could eat in 10 minutes and I had other time to just relax. And I've had a book come out since then too. And so I was more focused on what's my true purpose and why am I here, what am I doing. Then I would line up book signings, and next thing I knew, I had to work that Saturday, so I'd have to rearrange my book signing. So I thought, this job's kind of getting in my way, of what I really want to do. Well, on April 1st, I got laid off, which is April Fool's Day. And I thought it was so funny as the CEO was telling me, I was laughing inside, and he was so apologetic that they're eliminating the position. And I thought, wow. And when I drove away there, I felt totally free and felt this is just right on the mark of where I'm supposed to be. So in the last 4 months, I've done a lot of promoting and done things and had a lot of good times of fun. And I've got enough money to last me for the full year. And my attitude was, I'm never going back to that. I mean, I'm going to stay on what I'm to do. And if I open up, the things will move so that it works out fine. But not everyone in my world quite sees it that way as a possibility, or sees it as a possibility. But
well, we are not certain that you are 100% there because you've got this tangled fork thing going on. Huh. Usually, the longer we let someone talk, the more they begin to express that explains the underlying turmoil. In other words, you want to feel totally free and you want to feel totally ready for this, but you don't quite yet. And here's the thing that we so much want you to hear from us. You don't need to go get another job, and you don't need to go back to that. In other words, in this year, it is our full expectation that things will align and everything will unfold in a way that you will not miss a beat. But you don't quite know that yet. In other words, you're in the I'm hoping that's true stage, but you're not in the I have confidence and I'm knowing that stage. And the tangled fork syndrome, so to speak, and that irritability that arises is just pointing out that you're on edge about this. And so that's why you make it so easy for us to talk about this emotional journey, because in this year of leeway that you have so much opportunity to take that emotional journey, maybe 100 times in a day. Soothe the concern, soothe the worry, soothe the concern, soothe the worry, until your vibration really matches the words that you're speaking. We agree with you. We think the universe lined this up for you. And we think that it lined up with all of the elements in place. And we think everything is right on track. But It's like so many things. There is a vibrational difference between hoping you're all right and knowing you're all right. And you're in the hoping, wanting to hope, not quite sure, really want to be hoping, not quite sure, really wanting to be hoping place. And so that's the thing. You just take that emotional journey until you're in the I know that everything's all right. And then all of the success that you're looking for begins to come in to match that. Also, there's another thing, and this is a much more important thing that we want you to hear. As you begin to get into the rhythm of knowing who you are, and you take the next logical step, and the next logical step, and the next logical step, and the next logical step, you're going to notice that there's not a whole lot of hoopla in having just stepped into the next logical step. In other words, when you really, really want something and you are vibrationally very far apart from it, you feel like, oh, if that could happen, I would just go into orbit. Well, when you're that far apart, it can't happen, so don't worry about going into orbit. In other words, those kinds of things don't happen. And by the time you're vibrationally up to speed for it to happen, then it just feels sort of like the next logical step. Mm-hmm. Esther is irritated with us about that very thing. She says, by the time we reach the place where we can achieve things that we've dreamed since we were children, we don't get the big buzz from them that I thought that we would get. And we say, that's because you've been building to it vibrationally and emotionally so that it is just like the next logical step. And so many of these things that at one time seemed life-changing, or things like this that you will look back on from your future and call turning points, you will say, I didn't see it as the turning point that it was because it was the next logical step. The universe is just saying to you, here you go. You say, I would like such and such, and the universe says, here you go. The universe doesn't say, oh, wow, man, have we lined up the most unbelievable thing for you? Because that comes from a place of surprise and not really expecting it to happen. When the universe's attitude is, all right, here. You say, may I have, or I would really like to have, or what I really want is, and you can name anything under the sun that you can conjure, and the universe calmly says, here it is. Because it is known by all that is that anything that you desire can be. So, yes, here it is. The fanfare, all of that stuff, is conjured from man's misunderstanding, from his resistant-based place. So what did we just say? In simple terms, when you're ready for it, it doesn't feel like a big deal. When you're far from ready from it, it feels like a really big deal.
In many cultures, there is what's called a savior myth. And it appears in many different cultures in different forms, but it seems to be always the same theme. I'm wondering if the Christ of our Bible is the same thing as the savior myth, or has any of those attributes.
Give us even more to your question.
There's the same story in different cultures with the same attributes, the same history, the same different details, and it appears over and over again in different cultures
we
at
agree
different
with
times.
that. And now tie that together with the next part of your question.
The same attributes, the same history, the same details seem to appear in our Bible in relation to Christ. I'm wondering if there's any connection.
We agree with your first premise that mass consciousness often, when we speak of mass consciousness, we always want to clarify that mass consciousness is a sort of consensus of what a lot of people think at any point in time. And so it is never a good idea to put everyone in the same basket. But there is a common theme that happens again and again where individual does not see himself as either personally connected or as capable of saving himself. And so from that fear-based orientation where a big river or stream of the spin-off of man's conscious mind gets going, we talked about that earlier, that then a request for something to level the playing field or to bring balance to it comes into play. We would like to hear a little more from you about the way you perceive this request for a Savior.
I think it's a ingrained part of the human psyche to look for a Savior, look for someone outside of themselves
Yes.
to save them from whatever they
Yes.
think they need saving from,
Yes.
whether it's sin or whatever activity they think they need to be saved from. And it seems to reoccur, which makes sense because apparently each culture finds the need for this external Savior person. And I'm trying to find out if we're no exception as far as the Judeo-Christian.
It is identical. It exists for exactly the same reason as all of the others that you're talking about, yes.
And this is separate from the historical Christ? Is there an historical Christ and also a myth that's been created about him?
Yes, but that's true of everything. Because aside from a handful of people, in other words, don't you find that in your own experience that each person that knows you has a sort of mythical you? Don't you see that around everyone? That there is the you that you think you are, and then there's the you that your mother thought you were, and then there's the you that your girlfriend thinks you are, and then there's the you that your high school class thought that you were. And in other words, you're constantly becoming. Most of what you are acknowledged as is mythical because it's someone else's impression of who you are based upon where they stand, and has little or nothing to do with who you really are. And so we agree wholeheartedly with all of that. Let's talk about what that means. In other words, is it necessary for anyone to understand fully who anyone else is?
Well, I think it's kind of unrealistic to think that you can. And I think so many people end up doing that and shouldn't be doing that.
Well, it is disempowering, isn't it? And we would like to say to you that not all of these people who have been made out to be the Savior, but most of them have, at the time that they were living and with those that they were interacting with, that is not the message that they were speaking. In other words, in nearly every case, they were speaking a message of empowerment that was lost in the translation once they were no longer physically focused. In other words, and that's why the distinction that you're making between the historical Jesus or the realistic Jesus or the actual Jesus and the mythical Jesus, and usually that distinction is made from those who lived with him and knew him at the time, and those that are just perpetuating the story later. Jerry mentioned something the other day that, even though it sounds a little bit off the subject, it is so much on the subject and really worth talking about that it will sort of shake some of this up. He was acknowledging that not very many years ago, far fewer years than most any of you would recognize, a department store, in conjunction with the selling of toys, developed a promotional idea where they devised a little man in a red suit with a white beard, and they called him Santa Claus. And he was just part of a promotional campaign for this particular marketing organization. And when Jerry and Esther read the history of this, they were both very surprised because both of them thought that the myth of Santa had much deeper, older, longer roots. They didn't realize that such a short time ago, nobody had Santa at Christmas time. And yet today, the majority of modern cultures that have Christianity as their basis, and even some others, are enjoying the fun and festivities around this mythical being. And then Jerry said, I wonder if a few hundred years from now, Santa will be taught as someone who lived, someone who was a reality, someone that this mythical character was patterned after, but someone who actually exists. And then the two of them looked at each other as a sort of aha came over them that all of these saviors and historical beings become much more than they ever were at the time, as they are passed on from generation to generation and are used to fulfill the needs of the new generation.